Hi, you're listening to Mindset, spelled with AI, a tech podcast that is shaping what you think and know about AI. My name is David. I'm a tech journalist, and here with me is Filip, as always, an AI executive. Hi, Filip.
Hi, David. Good to see you. We're having a great March morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm busy. We're recording this on a Friday, and I feel like it's a Monday. I feel like this year has been each day is a Monday. I don't know how it's about for you.
Well, you double check in a calendar. I don't think so. That's true.
So, Filip, we have I proposed a topic and you jumped on it so hard. I haven't seen you jump on a topic so hard in a while. Let me first ask you this: when was the first time you heard the term SaaS-pocalypse? So SaaS-pocalypse or SaaS-apocalypse.
To be very precise, the way that you now name it, so SaaS-pocalypse, was probably somewhere end of January 2026 when I heard it for the first time. But the topic of itself made SaaS software companies might have an issue with AI replacing them was probably first bumping into me somewhere end of November 2025.
End of November. Did you know that in December 2024, Satya Nadella said this? I'm quoting here. Business applications are essentially crude databases with a bunch of business logic. All that business logic is moving to AI agents. December 2024. So you would say like, oh, Microsoft has been on the forefront of thinking about what's to come. Surely almost 2 years later, they must be winning.
I would correct you. I think this only proves that Microsoft was on the forefront of talking about problems probably coming because as you rightly pointed out, at least from like the last year and a half or two, I don't see Microsoft being the front runner or like a spearhead of solving these problems. Maybe they were lucky enough to name it, but I don't think so. They were kind of moving things forward to fight against it or like utilize it even.
Anyway, that's not the topic for today. That was just something to smile about. I looked at Google Trends for peaks, people looking for SaaS-pocalypse, because if you see that term, it's kind of like what's happening. And you rightly put it, it started going up in search trends end of January with a very sharp peak beginning of February, and then kind of like, just dropping down. So February has been like the peak month for like I would say like for the public to look at it. I think what happened, to be honest, is the public looked at it, said, I don't know what's happening here. I just see stocks plummeting, my portfolio being wiped out, whether that's SaaS or SaaS companies or like Bitcoin, whatever. And they just like moved on. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on in the world, but I think the topic itself hasn't been hotter in the circles that you are moving. So that's why I'm like super interested in what you are witnessing and how to understand what is happening at the moment with SaaS-pocalypse.
Yes, you're right. I think most of the people notice because of the stock market reaction to it. So not necessarily as a primary effect of the SaaS companies themselves. And we're going to talk about in a while why is it so and why it would stay so probably for a few more months ahead. But it's also interesting to me, quite honestly, that stock market is the one kind of pointing finger to this. And why is it surprising to me is because it's a little bit of a self-blame admission or admitting from the stock market. Because one of the main reasons why software has a room for kind of plummeting was that the software was a little bit bloated first place, right? And I think easy way to explain it to the audience is you don't need to be kind of a financial specialist to see the issue, because there's a very good metric which is publicly known, which is called a PE ratio. And in lame terms, what it does, it basically tells that we believe as a stock market that this company is going to have X many good years ahead. So if you have a PE ratio of 10, it basically says, I believe that this company can generate at least 10 as good years as it was having now. That's in rough terms what it does. Now, what would you think was a PE ratio for software SaaS companies?
I actually, I actually know this because, as I told you before, preparation for this podcast, I've been listening to other conversations about this, and so and the ratio has been like what it's I think like 40 even.
Yes. So most of the software companies, SaaS software companies, had 45 plus. There were few which had like 50 plus. So what that means is that the stock market believe that these SaaS companies are as solid that they will have at least 50 years ahead as good as they are. I mean, maybe you said, okay, is it too much? Is it too little? Well, just for comparison. So financial institutions like banks and insurance companies, which have been here for centuries and which are like very stable, they usually have a PE ratio of 12 to 15, right? So stock market believes that banks and insurance companies will have maybe 10 to 12 good years. And it believes it's going to have 45 to 50 years in software. Car producers have about 9. Fast-moving goods like FMCGs, I think they have about 15 to 20 based on what kind of product it is, right? Now, of course, to be completely precise, the stock market having a PE ratio for SaaS software 50 does not mean that they believe that they will have as like many as 50 good years compared to the banks. What it meant, it was also like hiding it because it was a multiple that the software companies are going to get better and better years. Because it's a kind of, if you have next year twice as a good year of this year, it basically equals as if you had 2 years. So what was really market saying that we believe that these are equally stable companies as the usual ones, so as the banks, plus they're going to accelerate their years. They're going to have even better years than now. So surprise, surprise, with this kind of average, meaning that they're going to have like 3 or 4 times better years than the banks and insurance companies or than the, let's say, FMCG or car producers. Now all of a sudden, where comes hesitation or some challenging of this, the plummet is serious. And it's because I think that the stock market was bloating this SaaS softwares. And why is it, maybe a short kind of remark, why was it doing that? Because these were the Lieblings of the stock market. I mean, if you remember, we discussed it before, the technological stocks actually gained, I think, over 40% of total capital allocated to the stock markets in the US lately. So they were the darlings. And now the darlings kind of have some issues. And all of a sudden, they are not that beloved anymore. And basically, what the stock market is doing is trying to bring it a little bit to the normal. So what we're seeing is still just a correction to the normal. And I have to say, it's probably going to be worse. And that's what we need to discuss today. So how it goes further and why is it actually in the state where it is?
Okay, so there are a couple of camps from what you said so far. It seems, although I think it's not the whole picture, is you're in the camp of like, okay, correction is happening. So that's I would say somewhere in the middle. On the other end of it, if you look at it as ratio, on the other end of it is like the SaaS-pocalypse, right? Like it's like everyone is going to be vibe coding everything within the companies. The SAS software companies are going away. They're going to be much more like smaller, etc. On the other end, like the other extreme is this is just like the markets got scared. We will see the AI bubble burst and it will go back as usual because we all know the AI has been a bubble and the software as a service is here to stay, 40, 50 years. So the question is, what do you think is happening here and which group is like out of touch and which group is probably near to the reality? Because I would say like we kind of presume, but maybe we still like don't know 100% at the moment.
Yes, and that's a good tangent to or good segue to answer that, because with all the respect, and I mean, in no means I try to be kind of cheeky or selfish in this one, but I don't think so that the SaaS companies themselves understand what is really going. Because if they did, I think they would be doing a lot of countermeasures because there are things to do against that. And hopefully at the end of this episode, we can mention a few things as a tips for the software companies, how to avoid this to become a real SaaS apocalypse. So I don't think they really know what's going. And again, like without trying to be kind of elitist here, I think that probably the AI side, like the real AI expert with few steps back, probably understand a little bit better what is going on because they are the force which are disrupting the setup. So let me give you what the AI community, which is thinking about it, like objectively or trying to be objective, says about the story. So first of all, we are still in correction. And why is it the case? Because I used to work for a SaaS company, and I can tell you that, like a dirty secret, that the real make it or break it happens in Q3 and the start of a Q4. Because most of the subscriptions, which are on an annual basis, the large ones, and are renewed somewhere in Q3 and Q4. So the software companies, as they stand now, are still relatively insulated from the real effect until a Q3 or Q4. When the Q3 or Q4 results strike, so that's going to be probably like on the edge of a 26 and 27 when they need to publish the first results or indications of it, it's going to be evident how bad or like how big of a problem this is. And until then, we're going to have only some early indicators. And therefore, I think what we see on the market now was just market probably bringing the labelings from the level of ridiculously optimistic into, let's say, let's be realistic, maybe they are companies as others and they don't deserve a PE of, I don't know, 50, but maybe 20-ish would be okay, right? Now, when the real results come in Q3 or Q4, then the questions come, okay, do they actually deserve to be at the same level of FMCG, or are they more on a kind of a banks, or actually have they withstand the issue and they, even though there was a lot of turmoil for them, they plugged in the countermeasures and maybe they deserve not 50 anymore, but 35 of a multiple kind of B. So now, with all the honesty, all three scenarios are possible, but also not to be alibistic about it. From what I see, the reaction of them, of the SaaS companies, I'm a little bit worried that they will dip more into the problem because the countermeasures that they can play, I don't see them coming. And therefore, I think that they're going to be surprised. Many of the SaaS companies also don't know how to quantify what is going to happen. There is a legendary investor call meeting now that Salesforce had a few days back. And basically the CEO running the investor call kind of gave a indication that they will not probably sustain the year-on-year growth anymore, but they were not really able or willing to tell how bad of a issue it's going to be. And I think it was more on not willing, because if they knew, they would have to answer to stay true to the markets. So and they got the like direct questions. So I don't think so they have a visibility into how big of a problem it is. And therefore, what we see now is just a mere first correction from super optimistic to let's be realistic about it. And there surely will be a second wave somewhere in autumn of 2026.
Okay, let's unpack this a little bit. And so you mentioned Mark Benioff of Salesforce, who many of the investors I follow and see online are saying he is very confident, at least like his public stance is very confident in that the changes they are doing are going to make sure they will be around in the time being. And so that's one point. And there are other chiefs of executives that are less confident, and you can see that in their public what they're saying. But at the same time, you said, oh, they're not sure what countermeasures to do. But actually, the most public argument many of them have been giving has been, we're going to replace everything with AI agents. Like AI agents seems to be the first aid kit, right? We don't know what's happening. So let's just like summarize it, and I will let you react. So the stocks are plummeting because there's correction going on. That means if you see companies like Block of Jack Dorsey, they needed to let go almost half of the company. The team's going to be leaner because the companies got bloated, because they could get bloated because the valuations were so high. Now the valuations are coming down. So first step is going to be, we need leaner teams. That's like universally everyone is saying. Second, we're going to replace many of the things we're doing with AI agents. So AI agents are doing this for us, and the small teams are going to be basically in charge of these AI agents and kind of like orchestrating them. And so we will keep growing, maybe not at the pace as we used to be growing, but we still keep growing and still be around, but there's just going to be less of us. So now you put it all together, that means there's a huge correction going to happen this year again, after like maybe the third year in a row. So many people probably going to lose their jobs in tech. So that's so far where I've gotten, and now tell me how you're seeing it, and where are the holes that you see in this strategy so far.
Yep. Okay. It's a very good summary. So let me pick up on it and build up on where I believe is the extension of it into next weeks and months to come. So first of all, we need to label first what the real issue is. And one of the reasons why I don't see too many SaaS software companies reacting well is that still didn't understand what the issue is, right? So let me put it this way. So first of all, most of the SaaS companies, their operating model is a recurring revenue coming from subscription. And maybe you remember it because you've been in tech podcast for years. There was a wave in past where a lot of companies were kind of trying to move from software licenses, like let's say lifetime licenses or versions of the software, into recurring revenue of a subscription. So back then, if you didn't do this, you were deemed to be kind of under-delivering. So most of the companies were forced by markets and competition to go into some kind of a subscription model. So most of the subscription, what they are based on. So usually like a size of an operation, it's one thing if you can like name it. So for instance, if you are, I don't know, a financial transaction company, maybe you are charged by a small, tiny multiple of how many transactions the software actually manages, right? But mostly and very often, because this is complicated to measure, or maybe companies don't want to disclose it, are doing it by, let's say, how many heads or seats are working with the software. So most of the software are having a usual user would use it for, I don't know, that many of, or the usual benefit would be that much. So I charge you, I don't know, 30 or 20 or 15 or 100 or 10,000 per seat. I mean, the AutoCAD software is, for instance, super expensive. Like there's hundreds or thousands of euros a year that you pay for software like that. So the first issue is the pricing, and I'm going to explain in a while why that's the case. The second issue is the inflexibility of the solutions. And what I mean by that is that before, the way it worked is that you had certain process, and the software companies were trying to look from the side what your process is and offer you automation or digitalization of some of your steps. But what you were forced to do, you were forced to adjust the process so that you can use the software. Right? So maybe it was not the best fit, but it was the easiest way for a software company to program it. And yes, over the time, there was like competition between who maps the process more smoothly and who like better maps. But still, I'm going to give an example. So you are operating a warehouse for your e-commerce company. There is a warehouse software, like warehouse management software for that. Now, if you are willing to manage your processes so that they are in line with the software, you can use it. But if you have your very own way of doing your warehouse, which is not the usual way, you had only two options. First of all, you asked some software house to code a specific tool for you, which was super expensive. Not many companies wanted to, or had a budget to do that. Or you had to adjust your process to fit the usual standardized way that the software companies programmed the applications to work. What software companies didn't realize that this inflexibility is probably going to be more of the issue than the pricing itself. And I leave that for the side because that would be like kind of jumping a little bit ahead of skis now. But we have to come back to the inflexibility till the end of the episode. So these are the two things. Now, what is not happening and what is misunderstanding from the software companies, because anytime I talk to software representatives, and given my role now, I talk to like tens of them every week. So what I hear is, this is not going to happen because the wipe-coded solutions cannot compete with the SaaS solutions in quality. And it's true, but it's misunderstanding of what is going to happen. because these SaaS companies think that somebody is going to wipe code an alternative to them and then offer this alternative cheaper as a kind of undercutting their business. But that's the biggest misunderstanding about SaaS-Apocalypse, because the key thing in SaaS-Apocalypse is shift in a build versus buy ratio. And let me spend maybe like a half a minute on that one. So essentially, when you are running a company, you have this dilemma. I need a piece of a software to do something. Shall I hire an internal team to program this and maintain this for me? Or shall I actually buy already a prepackaged solution, which I can plug and play, but then I have to accept the inflexibility of it for some things? And just to frame the discussion, do you know what's the ratio of the build and buy now for the most of the companies? What would be your guess?
They build more?
No, they don't. They actually buy more, and the recent setup is 85 to 15. So if you take 100 companies, 85 of them would decide to buy a prepackaged solution versus 15 would dare to build it themselves. And SaaS-Apocalypse is about this ratio. It's not about there will be new competitors, necessarily new agents who are going to do your work. Yes, they will be, but that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is, given the vibe coding, how many companies dare stop buying and start building? And also what people don't realize is that it doesn't have to be a seismic shift. Again, the SaaS companies assume that, but only few people dare to kind of wipe code or self-software, this is a new term, build a self-software of their own. Yes, maybe, but let's take it's going to be 10 or 15%, which is very realistic. Now, 15% out of 85 is substantial. 20% down in a revenue. So if 15% of a companies decide to build their own solution, which is a realistic scenario, the revenue of the SaaS companies on average is going to go down by 20%. And this is why we will see until the autumn, we will have to wait. But in autumn, we will have a first real data read, how many companies dared to drop the subscription that they have and go with the vibe coded solution. And as the vibe coding solution usually takes weeks, I think it will be already very clear in autumn how many dare, because the technology is there. You have a few months to think about it or to try until your next renewal day comes. So I wouldn't be surprised if like a Q2 and Q3, most companies come up with a solution, so they test it before the renewal date comes. And then when the renewal day comes, it will be a judgment day for the SaaS companies of how it really stands. So I think this is the essence of a problem for SaaS-Apocalypse.
Okay, so this is what you are describing is basically just the first wave, right?
Correct.
So this is the first wave, and we're going to have a read end of this year. What is happening? What is the second wave?
The second wave is that, and now we're coming a little bit back to indicated inflexibility, because the way to survive, so let's put it this way. Imagine you're a company. Imagine you have some technical stuff to dare to wipe code, because if you are, a hospital, you're very unlikely to have somebody who dares to kind of wipe code, a system to operate or to manage the operating arm, right? So that's not usually going to happen. So let's say that you are a company which has a staff and a technical possibility. The technology is already there to do it. Now, why would you still choose to stay with SaaS if you have a chance? And I think the answer is twofold. First of all, it's not economically sound to do it. So let's say the cost of vibe coding and maintaining is higher than the SaaS. That's one thing. Or it is maybe even cheaper, but the development would be slower. So maybe you can't take a benefit of that the software company has 200 engineers to develop the application. You would have only 2, for whom probably would be a side job anyway, because they were doing some things before. So then it comes down to, can the software companies get A, pricing in shape so the gap is not so wide? That's like the first thing. And B, can they accelerate a development mode in which they are faster than the company with the vibe coding itself?
Okay, a couple of questions, if I may. Basically, looking at the tech stack companies are running on, you have something which is like a light, like small apps people are using. Then there's like the middle stack, and then there's like the big platform public applications that are like really like take big teams to to cover. Now, that middle stack, from what I'm understanding, that's the most, I would say, from hearing you, me imagining, like that's most in danger, right? Like
Correct.
not super complicated to do, maybe not as not cheaper to maintain, but definitely faster and can to develop, and probably much more personalized to each company.
Correct.
Now the big platforms, and now this stack, the middle stack, and the large stack, the large platforms, they all also have one thing that someone has pointed out, and I'm curious on your take, is if I'm running a company and I'm licensing this kind of software and something goes wrong, is the problem of that company that I'm licensing from. Now, the middle stack, maybe some problems, but the large stack, if you say, especially like hospital, right? Like something goes wrong, like there's going to be, like they're going to sue them and get, like if they get something wrong, the company that's providing the software, there's going to be like real apocalypse for them. But if I'm doing it myself, suddenly I have also the legal burden on myself. And now the question is like, are those companies going to go for it?
Yes, I think your reading of a situation is very accurate, but there's a few more points than you mentioned. So maybe this is the right time to introduce the audience to two concepts. So there are forces which are going to accelerate this risk, or let's say increase the risk of the SaaS apocalypse for certain software companies. And then there are factors which are preventing or like diminishing the risk of SaaS apocalypse. And I think it's worth mentioning them because if you are an investor and you're trying to kind of orientate on yourself, on your market, these factors help you to understand if this is going to be all across the board issue, or maybe there are some companies who are now undervalued because they are like in the same pack with everybody else, but essentially their survival probability is much higher than the situation for other ones. So let's go through it. So let's start with the ones which prevent, okay? Because I think you also started naming some things from that corner. So first of all, one thing which is giving a lot of insulation from the SaaS apocalypse is when you are an infrastructure company. What I mean by that is if you are a cloud provider, if you are a company which is an antivirus, if you are a company which is doing a software for managing the network, the reason for that is that like maybe there's few people who think about coding their Microsoft Office alternative, but I don't think there's a lot of people who think of coding an alternative to an antivirus, because like you need so much expertise and so much like research that it doesn't make sense to do it. Or like to vibe code your own cloud. Maybe you can do it, but there is also other aspects behind it because you're actually just applying the software on top of the hardware, right? And if you don't have the hardware anyway, what good it is to have bare metal and like do your own cloud software. So if you are anywhere closer to the infrastructure, I think that seriously diminishes the risk of you being hit by that. Second thing is in areas which are high decision risk. So what I mean by that is exactly the examples of the hospitals or payment systems or government systems where the costs of being wrong are super high. And therefore, the chances that the wipe coding solutions would be viable options are lower. So what I mean by that is that, okay, you are operating a payment system like Visa or MasterCard. Who is really thinking of wipe coding alternative to MasterCard? So not many, because the transaction level, the amount that you would have to have for this to be profitable is a huge first place. And second place, like if you do the transactions wrong, it's almost like apocalypse for yourself for the developer of the solutions. So that's a second kind of slowing down or preventing measure. The third one is companies which have their own IT outsource. So what I mean by that is if you don't even dare to manage your own IT, you're very unlikely to wipe code the applications because maybe the, let's say, collective know-how to make it happen and to make it sustainable, make it efficient is very low. So again, I'm going to use the example of, let's say, I don't know, cinema, a social house, right? Or things like what's the chance that they're going to kind of have somebody in their staff who is going to do it if all the things are outsourced and managed as a service anyway. And then the last one, which is preventing, is when you are kind of as a software company doing something against the risk, and that's So software companies and SaaS solutions, which turn itself into self-improving systems, have higher chance of surviving because they're going to solve the inflexibility part.
Okay,
So
what do
what
you
I
mean
mean
by
by
that?
that is that maybe you can wipe code like version 1.0 of your CRM, of your, I don't know, financial HR system. But if it takes for you 3 months to adapt to a new legislation to wipe code it again, and this other software company runs a stack of AI agents which can identify the problem, solve the problem, code the problem, test the problem, and deploy the problem, solution to the problem automatically without any intervention, then it's probably a matter of hours before you can get the update. And so one of the things which a software company should think of is, can we actually prevent this by insulating ourselves and like outpacing the progress so fast that it doesn't make sense for the user to even think about it. And it's worse for the user to pay the SaaS license fee because the speed is so much better that they still have a value in it. So that's the kind of a preventing side. Does it kind of ring a bell with you? Does it inspire any questions on your side?
I mean, I have other questions, but let's move on. Let's continue with this topic, and then I want to bring it home a little bit.
Okay, cool. So let me then cover the other side, the accelerating part. So first of all, as you rightly pointed out, the biggest extension risk or biggest risk of SaaS apocalypse being serious is the middleware companies. The software which were kind of transferring information from one system to another, or trying to aggregate information together, or we're trying to work with some kind of a digital documents. So these are all areas where the risk is super high. Why it's so? Because very often what they need to do, they need to orchestrate like discussion between the systems. And this is exactly what agenting AI is really good at. And maybe it can even figure it out on itself, because the value added of these softwares were that there were programmers who spent time building APIs or interconnectors or like understanding different setups of different systems and matching the data. Now AI is very good at it itself. So if you need to program an application which starts to send data from one system to another, all you need to do is give access to the data models, and the AI is going to figure itself. It's going to write an API. It's going to test it. It's going to even kind of secure it and deploy it itself. So this is an area where I would be super worried. So companies which are doing this, and also the companies which are like just their value added of the software was processing some kind of a digital document, that is a super risky area as well. The second acceleration is if this has been an admin or back office processes in the companies which have their own IT development departments, right? Because then you are kind of have no technological barrier, and maybe the costs are interesting enough for you to do it. What I mean by that? So let's take a usual example of this. Let's say a CRM system or an HR system. So even an IT company has to pay for that. And maybe they pay by number of clients or number of seats or whatever. But I would imagine it's like probably a higher thousands of dollars that they are paying for it. Maybe even like tenth of a thousands. In extreme cases, maybe hundreds of a thousands. Now, that's only a matter of a time where somebody will say that, okay, so let's take the functionality of this, let's throw it into an autonomous coding agent, and let's try. And they don't have to give up the original SaaS subscription until they have an alternative, but they are very likely to get an alternative. So this is another area where the acceleration is very likely. The third area is systems which are just passive. What I mean by that is like business intelligence systems. So all they do is they combine existing data and they present it. Or a monitoring systems. All they do is that they listen to some kind of a stream of data, or they watch a video stream or something, and then they report the things. This is again thing which agentic AI can do really well. So for these companies, the SaaS apocalypse will have little mercy, and they're going to be pretty exposed. And then there are like three more things on the acceleration. So, and please notice that there is more on the acceleration side than on the prevention side. So this is why I also think that we are only seeing a wave one. So let me just quickly finish the acceleration part. So the other thing is a high tolerance to like software or areas where there's a high tolerance to repeat or correction. What I mean by that is the contrary to the medical systems. So in medical systems, even a small mistake is a huge impact. In sales system or like CRM, if it sends a wrong message, well, we get so many wrong messages from the salespeople anyway, from the human ones. So there is like a reasonable tolerance that it would send a corrective message with apologies, right? And I think it would be widely accepted or mostly accepted in the system. So what that means that the solutions don't have to be like bulletproof, and therefore it's easier to code a good enough version of a CRM or sales system versus a good system of a payment or let's say a medical operation system. And then the last thing is, of course, the solutions where there's a high seats costs. So software where already the gap to producing it through wipe coding or let's say autonomous coding versus the licenses is really big. And here I think a good poster child of it is like blueprinting systems. So AutoCAD and similar design systems, which were usually quite expensive as well. So before Figma maybe. So these are kind of areas where I would see the issue. And maybe a small cherry on a cake. So one thing which could accelerate the thing is if a lot of people will approach this as an open source. Because when you wipe code an application, you can keep it for yourself. But maybe there is a lot of other people who would have the same issue. And if you have before like have a mindset of open source and you actually make it available, maybe you speed up the things for somebody else. So what that means is that this first wave we are now experiencing is going to bring some companies who dare to do it, and maybe they're going to be the early pioneers to show the other companies, especially I think in scenarios where maybe your company didn't dare to wipe code, but you're paying 100,000 for SaaS a year. Now your neighboring company or sister company or whatever did dare, or your competitor, which is willing to talk to you, did do this. And now you're going to see, okay, so they saved almost 100K a year. Well, that's definitely worth trying. So let's maybe try to pick their solution, which might be, again, not a perfect match. But if it saves 100K, well, that's definitely worth trying. So that's what I believe is going to be the trends for accelerating the SaaS apocalypse for software companies.
Very, very, very nice summary. So let's bring it home. Before we do that, and you provide the question that you posed in the beginning, like what should you do? I have two questions before that. So first one is, when more and more companies start doing this, not the last thing that you mentioned, but basically vibe coding solutions that are out there, basically say like I did it, right? Like I wanted an app, I vibe coded it, and I said like create a version of this app for me. Now, where does it stand like legally, right? Like I'm not selling it, I'm not providing it like for other costs for everyone. Like, are we going to see cases where these companies are going to start to protect and maybe send the assistant, these letters from lawyers, or because it's like in house, no one is going to care? Like I'm hazy on this, but I feel like it's not missing something. It's almost like the early days of like media on the internet where it was like totally okay. Well, it wasn't later turned out, but like it was okay to take like a Disney movie, put it on YouTube, or a TV show, put it on YouTube, and then YouTube kind of had to do a deal with all these companies. And like, is it possible even to think of something in software land?
Yes, it's a very good question. I have to be kind of careful answering it because it could hijack the discussion for long. So let me give you a very short version of the answer to that question, because I could probably talk hours about that. So my shortest version to your question is, I believe this is going to happen because the software companies have no intellectual property about the way that the applications work. They have maybe intellectual property on the actual screens and maybe the names of it and so on. But what I mean by this is nothing is stopping you from letting your agent to observe you while you're working in the existing SaaS version of the software, record it, and then tell the AI, I want to have my own version of it.
I mean, you don't even have to do that. They give it to you. When you buy the software, you get the guides, you get the documentation. They send you a bunch of onboarding videos. Like, what's stopping me from taking all of this and like, okay, just do like a version 2 of this, slightly different, maybe personalized. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes, I do. So if you do it with their documentation, it'll be a little bit of an abstract way, because that is their intellectual property. So that they would have a way to fight back on that one. But it's a little bit like nobody can stop you listening to the music and then record your own version of it. unless you're using exactly the same lyrics and exactly the same, but like, let's say a similar flavor of it. So let's say you write, I don't know, the jazz music. Nobody stops you to listen to the jazz, and then you do your own jazz, right? And so therefore, I think that it's going to happen because fundamentally there is no technological barrier for this. And there are few legal barriers, but they are very weak, very weak. So the software companies didn't even bother to carve out, okay, you can't use our software to mimic and to, because they said, who would bother, right? They kind of were in the situation, oh, it's such an unlikely scenario, we don't need to be protected against it. Maybe now they're going to change their mind, and especially the cloud SaaS, maybe they can do it now, so they can plug additional legal formulations into the terms and conditions to prevent this. But again, like we all know, as in Napster times was the case, for some time it's going to be a shady area, and a lot of people are going to enjoy the free ride, and then they will settle on something which like works on a kind of a Spotify model or something, right? So I think this is a very good question. I think it's going to happen, and I think we are now in a Napster starting times where this is going to be wild before it gets ever regulated.
Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left. Two last quick questions. Where does Europe stand in all of this? Is Europe a winner or a loser? Because like you don't have like so many successful SaaS companies over here compared to like other regions. Okay, maybe you can say I'm wrong. And then please give us the list of like what can companies actually do.
Yes, I think you're a little bit underestimating the European landscape of the SaaS companies, because you're right that we don't have that many big poster stock market kind of representations of those, but we have a lot of copycats. So we have a lot of companies who are doing the same thing as Salesforce is doing, but not being as big, or the same thing as, I don't know, Monday.com is doing it. I think there's quite a few of them. What I will say, what's very different in Europe and in US, that Europe is much more fragmented in this regard. So they don't have these big players. But to be fair, I don't know if it's to the benefit or to the detriment of the Europe. It's just, I just notice it's very different. Because of course, the big players like Salesforce or Monday.com are now much more in a spotlight. They are much more punished by the stock market SaaS-apocalypse. They are much more under the spotlight what is going to happen and how they're going to solve it. Maybe that like stimulates them to do something, but it also can punish them harder for not doing something. So I do see these two environments very different. I do see also that the Europe is a little bit behind in adopting the agentic AI, probably a few months behind that the US. That's because I worked in the US and I have seen like what's usual when I went to California to talk to the colleagues and when I talk to the local people here in Europe doing the same thing. But I am, with all the honesty, I cannot judge which of that positive and negative factors will prevail in this one. If it's going to be to the shield of the Europe, this fragmentation, or if it's going to be to making it even worse because the smaller companies will have less resources to fight this trend. And also probably like you will need more companies to realize this issue and fix it for like the same percentage of the SaaS revenue to survive, right? So it can be either ways, and it's not really clear. The jury is still out on if this is going to be positive or negative for Europe.
Okay, so now give us your list what you think these companies actually can or should do.
So first of all, and this is going to be painful, they need to rebuild their pricing, because they were enjoying behemoth margins. It's no secret that most of the SaaS software profitability was somewhere around 60+%, right? Or at least in like spectrum of 40, 50, 60%. So there's not that many other products which have such a good profitability. So they will have to do something with the pricing. Of course, it's going to be difficult because you have all of a sudden everybody having the same request. So it's not like some segment of my customers wants a discount and I can maybe smartly kind of behind the curtain, like do some discounts for them. But pricing certainly, and changing the pricing model is certainly something which is going to be important. And I predict that the ones which survive are probably going to pay more for staying up to date and getting these fast versions. So maybe you're going to have like you can have a non updating version for lower money, which we will not invest into developing, which we already developed and is like paid for, and is a pure margin for us just to sell it to you. Versus if you want to stay on the fast improving version, the subscription is going to be higher. So that's one thing which they can and should do.
Are you saying that the pay for the software for lifetime is going to come back?
That's one thing. A lot of the vibe coding solutions would be like, okay, I coded it. It cost me, I don't know, $2,000 of tokens to program it. So if I can sell 100 pieces for $20, then I'm break even and everything else is nice to have. So let's sold the lifetime license for $20 and I still going to be like making a lot of money on it, right? So that is going to certainly happen. I don't think so. This is going to happen in the much large corporation, so SaaS dimension. There, this is very unlikely to happen because a good lifetime license would be still very costly, and still the vibe coded version would be probably cheaper at least in short term for sure. So I don't think so. But what will come is a multi-year subscription will come again. So I think I suspect that the first defense move of software companies would be to offer the same software for 3 more years for like a discount, but like bound them for 3 more years. This is what the telecom does, right? I mean, this is the usual strategies. I think there will be a lot of analogies between how telecoms was struggling with customer retention and SaaS will struggle with customer retention. So yes, this is likely to happen in pricing. But the more important thing, because it's still going to be a short-term play. Maybe you can get a discount for a year, maybe you get a 3-year, multi-year solution, but then will come a time where you have to face the decision, the buy versus build shift. And to prevent people shifting from buy to build, I personally see only one factor now being realistic, and that is that you switch your software into self-improvement autonomous mode. And to give it a bit more kind of description to make it real for the audience, what I'm talking about. So now, if you're running a software and you miss something in a software, you have to write a ticket to the software provider. Hey, we would like to have this. And based on how important of a customer you are, they might or might not consider this as a potential improvement. Now, in this new setup, how it would look like, directly in the application, you will have a small give me improvement suggestion window. You type it in, no humans looks at it, AI takes it, analyzes it, develops the feature, tests the feature, and then with some kind of a feature flag, activates the feature only for you. And you can keep on using it. And as a lot of people will do this, maybe once a month, the company will collect all of the interesting improvements that some of my customers did, and it will offer a general update to everybody else saying, these are the cool features that some of your peer users suggested. We coded for them, and they look to be promising because also they can observe which of these feature flags for the companies are being used and being useful, right? So they'll probably not propose to the general upgrade features which somebody wanted to have, but actually they use it twice a month with no particular kind of impact on the total efficiency of the solution. So this is how I think would a software company have a way to survive. And funny enough, it's not that complicated. It's just a mind model because the self-coding solutions are there. It's all technologically possible. It's only can the top management of the SaaS companies give away this I decide what is being developed and I develop it myself or my team versus I let AI do it.
Okay, so my question is, where do we go from now?
Yeah. Well, I guess a lot of things which we told today is still a science fiction for many SaaS companies. So I haven't seen a lot of good examples which would be already radically rethinking their pricing or introducing this self-improvement function directly into their softwares. So what that means is that for foreseeable future, they're going to be hit by the negative aspects of it. Because also, if you remember, the accelerating factors were much more numerous than the decelerating. So my prediction is that it's going to get worse before it gets better for software companies. And basically the steps where it's going to be more and more evident how well the companies are coping with this is when the big companies report their business results. So the stock listed, paradoxically, the private companies have probably a little bit more wiggle room for surviving because they don't have to show how bad the problem is. It doesn't save them from like facing the issue, but if they have some capital cushion or some enough savings to survive, maybe they have more time. The public listed companies will be the indicators of how well the SaaS companies are dealing with this or not.
Filip, thank you. I think you've given us a lot to think about. I'm sure we will come back to the topic even before autumn. Maybe we can try to do an update after the next quarter, that the results we will see. But I will be definitely following what's happening. So thank you. That's all for this episode. You can find Mindset in your favorite podcast app on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn. We're both on LinkedIn. And find all the information either in the description of the podcast or go to mindsetpodcast.com. That's spelled with AI. Filip, thank you. Till next time.
Pleasure. Till next time.
Bye.